left off a little bit ago, you remember we had our 3-step process for implementing a sustainable preparedness lifestyle. You remember step 1? What was step 1? The storm is coming, get out of its way, right? Okay. Step 2 was that we need to implement a sustainable preparedness lifestyle where we're not dependent upon the systems for our basic necessities of life. And then step 3, prepare to share. That's right. So we want to take a closer look at each one of these just for a few minutes and see what we can find and to get a little bit better understanding of how this works. So step 1, the storm is coming, get out of its way. Now, you remember, I mentioned to you that I'm going to share with you the secret that God has given us of where the safe places are. What is the best place to be? This is probably the most frequently asked question that we get. Where is the best place to be? And I'm going to tell you where the best place to be is. And so a story that comes to my mind to illustrate this, actually 2 stories, the Judean Christians in Jerusalem and Lot. Both of these stories illustrate a principle regarding how God works when disasters and judgments are coming. Because what we find with both of these stories is that God could have very easily saved his people in those situations. He could have very easily saved the Judean Christians in Jerusalem, where everyone else was killed, but they were saved out of the midst of that. Isn't God able to do that? And the same thing with Lot. The Lord could have preserved Lot and his family, where the whole city was just charcoal, and they walked out from it untouched, just like he did the 3 worthies in the furnace. Couldn't he have done that? But did he do that? No. He brought them out. God removed his people from those cities before his judgments were poured out upon them. This is a principle of how God works, friends, and I believe that it is one that applies every bit as much today as it did back then. You want to know the safe places to go? Here we go, friends. Out of the cities. Out of the cities. This is the message the Lord has been giving me. The earthquakes will come, the floods will come, and we are not to establish ourselves in the wicked cities where the enemy is served in every way and where God is so often forgotten. Out of the cities, friends. This is the message that God has been giving us, and there's reasons for this. There are reasons why we should not build in the cities. On these cities, God's judgments are soon to fall. Now, this is not something that we are going to belabor because I'm relatively certain that most of us here today are very familiar with this. It's something that we are aware of, but for many of us, we've just kind of tucked it back in kind of the back part of our brains, because it makes us a little bit uncomfortable to think about it because we're so comfortable where we are right now. And it just seems like it's going to be so hard, and do we have to do this? And so we just kind of tuck it away. It's there in the back of our minds, but we kind of tuck it away. Friends, it's time that we take action on what God is telling us to do. There's reasons why he tells us to do things, friends. There are reasons. He's God. We're human beings. He knows what's coming. He knows what is best. And it's time that we heed the instructions that he has given us. And if any of you are not familiar with these things, I encourage you to get that little booklet, Country Living. You can pick it up at the Adventist Book Center. I'm pretty sure they all have them. It's a little green cover or brown cover. It says Country Living. And you can read all about it there. I'm not even going to spend a lot of time on that because that is required reading, friends, on this topic. And it's all right there. You can read it in one afternoon. And it's very, very clear that God has told us for a multitude of reasons, one of which is this very fact that judgments are coming upon the cities, and God does not want his people to be partakers of these judgments. Period. God wants us to be the head and not the tail. And so, friends, that is just one reason. There's a multitude of others. Another reason that comes to my mind is one that is summed up in this verse, Psalms chapter 46 and verse 10. Be still and know that I am God. There's something about quietness that lends itself to hearing God's voice. There's something about it. Friends, God created us in a garden, in natural surroundings, with the quiet peace of nature, without the artificial. And in those surroundings, we can find the opportunity for the closest possible connection with God. And I don't know about you, friends, but with what's coming, I feel the need to have the closest possible connection with God. Because the realization I've come to, we so often get so fixated on, well, we need to be doing this, and we need to be doing that. We need to be doing evangelism, and we need to be doing this and this and this and this. Friends, we often forget that we, of our own selves, can do how much? Nothing. And so I can be working like crazy, trying to do all kinds of things in my own strength, and what is that going to accomplish? Nothing. The only way I can do anything is if I am connected with Christ. And so, when we realize this fact, we realize that even when it comes to something like evangelism, the most important aspect of our evangelism is our connection with Christ. If we have a close connection with Christ, we will be in a position to share. But you can't share what you don't have, can you? And so this is a principle that we need to realize, friends, that the most important thing in our lives right now must be having the closest possible connection with Christ. And friends, the Lord has told us what kind of environment we need to be in to gain that closest possible connection. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to say that the Lord can't find you in the city. He can. He will find us wherever we are. But friends, He wants to bring us up to something better. He wants to bring us to something better. He wants the ultimate for us. And friends, with what we're coming up to in the last days, we need the ultimate. We need the closest possible connection with Christ. And so this is yet another of the many, many reasons. Few realize the importance of shunning, so far as possible, all associations unfriendly to religious life. In choosing their surroundings, few make their spiritual prosperity the first consideration. We're so often busy thinking about, well, where can I make the most money? Where's the best job? Or where can I get the cheapest house? Or where's this? Where's that? What should the first consideration be? The spiritual prosperity of our family. Instead of the crowded city, seek some retired situation where your children will be, so far as possible, shielded from temptation, and there train and educate them for usefulness. Friends, this is an important reason. There's a multitude of reasons for making this move from the city to the country. But God has told us, and you know what? It's time that we practice what we would want our children to do, We want our children to obey us, don't we? Even if they don't understand. When you see your children running towards a car that's driving down the road and you holler at them, stop, you don't want them to turn around while they're running and say, well, why? If you'll explain to me why, then I'll stop. We want them to stop, right? And this is what the Lord desires from us. Sometimes we understand it, and sometimes we don't. And the Lord is asking us to obey. He says, do what I say, and you will be happy, and you will be safe. And I'm thankful for that, aren't you? I'm so thankful for that. So, step 1, storm is coming. Get out of its way. Step 2, remember, implementing a sustainable preparedness lifestyle. And so I wanted to go into a few things about this because this is a topic that sometimes people are confused about. For some reason, they can understand a lot of these other things, but when it comes to the issue of food, they just, for some reason, just seem to have a great deal of confusion on this issue. And the Bible is very clear about this issue. So let's see what the Word of God has to say. Go to the ant, thou sluggard, consider her ways, and be wise, which having no guide, overseer, or ruler, provideth her meat in the summer, and gathereth her food in the harvest. Now, my question is, why is this ant putting away food in the summer? When you read that word meat, you go back to the original Hebrew, and it's talking about food, especially food. Why is this ant putting away food in the harvest? Any ideas? Not much food around in the winter, is there? Right? Okay, that's pretty common sense. Have to give it to the ant there. Good sense. Okay. Proverbs 30:25. The ants are a people not strong, yet they prepare their meat in the summer. Once again, this same principle that we've been reading about, putting away in a time of plenty to get you through a time of scarcity, being the winter time. So this is what is the common practice of the ant, and we're being instructed as to our duty here. Prepare thy work without, make it fit for thyself in the field, and afterwards build thine house. Now this is a very interesting verse, because so often, coming from a construction background, you have a certain order that you do things in when you're developing a homestead. One of the first things is to place the house. You decide where you're going to put the house, and you use a number of pieces of criteria to do that. But you figure out where you're going to put the house. Then you can route the driveway there, and then, the woodshed goes here, the storage shed goes there, the septic system goes there, and, where is the garden going to go? Oh, that's the only spot left over there, so we'll put the garden over there. That seems to be the way that it goes. That's the order of priorities. But when we read this, we see that God has an entirely different order of priorities, doesn't he? This is how important agriculture is. He says, prepare thy work without, and make it fit for thyself in the field. In other words, you're going to choose the best portion of your land for the agriculture. You are going to find the part of that land. In fact, this is going to be something that determines which piece of land you buy. You're going to be looking to see if it's good for agriculture. And if it is, then you're going to take the best portion with the best soil and the right slope and all of these things, and you're going to use that for your agriculture, and you're going to get that rolling. You're going to take a soil sample. You're going to be adding your amendments. You're going to be planting your fruit trees and all these various things, making it fit for thyself in the field, and only afterwards, only after you've started that process, afterwards, build thine house. This is very interesting about the importance that God places on this agriculture. But you know what? It makes a lot of sense, because agriculture, any of you who have done much gardening, you know that agriculture takes what? Time. It takes time. And you have to learn in the school of hard knocks, don't you? Just from making mistakes. And one thing that makes agriculture such a time-consuming business is that when you do make a mistake, especially in more northern areas, how long do you have to wait till you get another try? Next spring, right? So this takes time. And the fruit trees, they don't just, boom, start yielding, do they? You're looking at several years before you get much of anything. And so the Lord is saying this agriculture is essential. You need to get that rolling ASAP. And only after you've started that process do you worry about your house. Very, very interesting. And then from Ecclesiastes, moreover, the profit of the earth is for all. The king himself is served by the field. So it doesn't matter how high and mighty you are, you still have to eat, don't you? You still have to eat. And the Bible is just full of this instruction regarding agriculture. And I believe that it is from so many directions. It is not only for us to be able to provide our own food, but I believe it's also about getting good quality, nutritious food that is free from all the harmful things. You know, we're so into organic these days, and that's a good thing. But you realize organic simply tells you what is not there. It doesn't tell you what is there. Do you catch my point? Organic is not telling you that it is nutritious food. All it's saying is that harmful pesticides and chemicals and things like this were not used. Most of our food these days, a lot of our food, is rather deficient. When you test it, there are ways of testing it, and when you look at it, it's quite astounding at how the lack of nutrition is there. And so this is Another reason why it's important that we do our own agriculture, because then we can have control over the quality of this produce. And there's something healthful about just getting out there and working the soil, you know? Something about getting your hands in that dirt. Something about it. Something about it. And just from many, many aspects. And you know, the Apostle Paul had some strong words for Timothy regarding the importance of providing for these physical aspects of life. He says, if any provide not for his own, especially for those of his own house, he has denied the faith and is worse than what? An infidel. Wow, those are strong words, aren't they? But this is the testimony of God regarding the sacred duty of providing for your family's basic necessities. Now, I imagine that everyone here is a good provider. Everyone who's the provider of their family is doing a good job, I imagine, and you're doing it well right now. But I want you to think ever so slightly into the future. And I want you to think about what it would take to provide for your family if any of these conveniences that we have become so dependent upon were taken away for whatever reason. And friends, we have no assurance that these conveniences are always going to be here, do we? In fact, we have every reason to believe that these conveniences will not always be here. Not only from what the news is saying and what the government is saying about what's coming down, but even if we look to the more sure word of prophecy, we can see that eventually, even above and beyond all these storms that are coming and all of these issues that are coming, we can see that if we are true to God, we will not be able to buy or sell eventually. And at that point in time, there go the conveniences. All of these that we are dependent upon. And so I want you to ask yourself, friends, right now, would I be able to follow this, to obey this verse, and provide for the needs of my family if I could not buy or sell? Not if, friends, when I cannot buy or sell, or when any of these conveniences are taken away, even before the time when it's impossible to buy or sell. We are facing, our infrastructure in this nation is so teeter-tottery that all it takes is the right disasters at the right time, and boom, there it goes. And so ask yourself this question, friends, would I be able to do this? And I think it's helpful sometimes if we step back in time a little bit. Step back just a century and see how much has changed. What was the common practice of people just 100, 150 years ago? So I'm going to read you some things that I think you'll find to be quite surprising, because most of us have been raised where we don't even know any better. We've been raised the way we're living today, and we don't realize how different it was not very long ago. Take a look at what the common practice of people was back then. What was their common practice? Wherever fruit can be grown in abundance, a liberal supply should be prepared for winter by canning or drying. Once again, just like the little ant that we read about in the book of Proverbs, putting away food in the harvest to get you through the winter till the next harvest, right? That's what we're reading about here. This was common sense back then. I find Sister Nelson to be a faithful, economical housekeeper. She has been very busy canning fruit and drying corn. The others have not been able to help her much, for they have all been busy on the writings. But Mrs. Nelson does not complain. She sees what needs to be done and does it. This is a great blessing. She has already canned 138 quarts of tomatoes, 60 quarts of loganberries, and 75 quarts of applesauce, besides cherries, peaches, and apricots. We hope to have 200 quarts of tomatoes put up. We have nearly a bushel of sweet corn dried and have had sweet corn on the table nearly every day for 2 or 3 weeks. Mrs. Nelson was pretty busy during the harvest season, wasn't she? But friends, this was the way life was back then. This was just standard operating procedure. And you know, the closer that we approach to a agrarian lifestyle, the more we find that, sure enough, the harvest season is your busiest season of the year. But it's something entirely different than the busyness that we're used to now. It is such a rewarding kind of busyness. You know, I think that the Lord has built into us the need to be involved with providing for these basic necessities. I think there's something in us that is empty. There's some kind of a void there if we are not directly involved in some capacity in providing for these things like our food and our water and our heat if we just forget about them and just leave it to someone else to provide for these things. We are missing out on something. But this was just the common practice of almost everyone back then. Each year, we put up not less than 600 or 800 quarts of canned fruit. We have peaches, apricots, nectarines, grapes, plums, and tomatoes canned. I remember we were interviewing people that had been living during the Great Depression, the late 20s and throughout the 30s. And I remember this one gentleman telling us that he said, my family and I were poor farmers during the Great Depression. And if we didn't put up at least 1,000 quarts of food, we'd starve to death that winter. That was just the way it was. Just a matter of fact. That's, you don't do it. You don't put up the food. You don't eat. You don't eat. You starve. That was just the way it was. It was common sense back then, but friends, I'm afraid it has become uncommon sense now. You know what I mean? And I'm wondering, we've been looking at these verses written thousands of years ago in the scriptures. We've been looking at what the common practice of people was as recently as 100 years ago or so. And I'm wondering, what are we thinking? What has given us permission to place our dependence upon the grocery man? You know what I mean? Who has given us permission to place our dependence on the arm of flesh? What does the Bible say about placing your dependence upon the arm of flesh? Cursed be the man that places his dependence on flesh, that makes the flesh his arm. And friends, that is exactly what we are doing. I want my trust to be in God. And the way that we put our trust in God is by doing what He has told us to do, following His instructions and leaving the rest in His hands. But friends, we are depending upon the grocery man. We are placing our trust on the arm of flesh and making this our trust. And the Lord has warned us against this. And so, friends, not only do we still have a duty to provide for our basic necessities now, not only is this still just as important as it was 100 years ago and 1,000 years ago, but friends, I want to share something with you that this is even more important now than it was. Take a look at this and read the underlined part first, because this kind of sets the stage for where we're talking about in the whole scheme of events. It says, for in the future, the problem of buying and selling will be a very serious one. Now, obviously, this is still future for us. We can still buy and sell, can we not? So this is still future for us. This is referring to the whole end time scenario. It's going to be the problem of buying and selling will get more and more serious, and eventually it'll become impossible when the decree is passed. So, still future, with that in mind, let's go back and read this from the beginning. Again and again, the Lord has instructed that our people are to take their families away from the cities into the country where they can raise their own provisions. This is still in the future, friends. This is part of the whole end time scenario. Why are we supposed to do this? For in the future, the problem of buying and selling will be a very serious one. Friends, look at the God that we serve. Not only has He warned us of what's coming, but He's told us how to prepare. He says a storm is coming. For lack of basic necessities of life, you are going to be manipulated. Remember that military intelligence report that we read a little while ago? For fear of wanting food and clothing, they will yield. Remember that? And so the Lord is saying, these things are going to be used to manipulate you in the last days. For this reason, get out of the cities into the country where you can live a more independent lifestyle, where you can provide for your basic necessities of life, where these things will not be used to manipulate you, because the time is coming when it's going to be very difficult, finally impossible to buy or sell. And friends, this is referring to the food issue here, but I believe that this principle applies to the other basic necessities of life as well. Take a look at this from Lamentations. Jeremiah is just pouring his heart out here about this catastrophe that has come upon the children of Israel. And let's read about what this catastrophe is. He says, "Remember, O Lord, what has come upon us. Consider and behold our reproach. Our inheritance is turned to strangers, our houses to aliens. We are orphans and fatherless. Our mothers are as widows." Now notice this, very important. "We have drunken our water for money. Our wood is sold unto us. We have given the hand to the Egyptians and to the Assyrians to be satisfied with bread." Do you see what this is talking about, friends? Don't think for a moment that Jeremiah is just weeping because they're having to spend extra money on these things. Friends, the reason why Jeremiah is pouring his heart out here, the reason why this is such a catastrophe, is because they are now dependent upon their enemies for their basic necessities of life, for their water, for their ability to heat their homes and cook their food, and for their very food itself. And an interesting thought hits me. I wonder, here's Jeremiah just weeping, and I wonder how many of us are drinking our water for money? Ever thought about that? And you realize you don't have to be going to the grocery store and buying water in a gallon jug to be drinking your water for money, do you? You don't even have to be hooked up to the city municipal water authority to be drinking your water for money. Almost everyone in America is drinking their water for money. How so? Even those in the country on a well. With the way almost everyone is set up, they are drinking their water for money. Just stop paying your power bill for a few months, and you'll find out how independent that water source is. Because what does it take to get water out of that well? Electricity. That's right. Now, there are excellent ways to set up an independent water system, and we're going to talk about that tomorrow. But my point is, with the way that almost everyone is set up right now, they are completely dependent. And friends, this is by design. I'm here to say this is by design of the enemy to get us into this kind of a condition. How many of us is our wood sold unto us, our ability to heat our homes and cook our food? And you realize that even if you're not on total electric heat, even propane and natural gas and these other forms of heat, you still have to buy the gas, and if it's a forced air system where it's forcing the heated air throughout the house, it takes electricity to do that. How many of us are putting our hands out to the Egyptians and the Assyrians to be satisfied with bread? How many of us are dependent upon the grocery store for our food, you know? In America today, it's gotten to the point at which we almost don't even know any better because we've been raised this way. The last generation that lived a different way is dying off. And it's getting to the point at which most people alive today don't even know any better. Where does water come from? It comes from the faucet, right? Where does food come from? It comes from the grocery store, maybe even the restaurant. Where does heat come from? Turn that little thermostat up on the wall. You know, friends, we've lost touch with reality. And so God is calling us to take responsibility. He has given each one of us a responsibility. And men, you as the heads of your family have a God-given responsibility. God has placed this upon you to provide for your family, not only now, but in the days ahead. This is a sacred responsibility, friends. This is not something to be taken lightly. And this is why step 2 is so important, to set up in an independent way so that you are not dependent upon the systems for your basic necessities of life. Okay, step number 3, our final step for sustainable preparedness. Remember, prepare to share. Now, this is a very interesting one because you realize that God has He's placed us here on this earth for a mission. We have a purpose, right? We're not just here for ourselves, are we? We are here to be a blessing to others. We are here to serve. That's why Jesus came to this earth. He was here to serve. And interestingly enough, even though this nation started out as a very rural nation, in the beginning, not even in the beginning, but back in the 1790s or so, you can look on the Census Bureau website and you'll find that America was about 97% rural back in 1790. But then the cities started getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger to the point at which now the United States looks like this. And you know what percentage of our population lives in the cities now? It's around 80%. That's pretty remarkable, isn't it? 80%. On a global basis, it's about 50%. This is how urbanized America has become. 80%. So what that means is, if we have a mission to minister to the people of this world and of this nation, where are most of those people? In the cities. That's right. And so it's especially important that we have an effective method of most effectively reaching the people who are in the cities. This is our mission, is it not? To reach the people. Most of the people are in the cities. So that means city evangelism is very, very important. But friends, there's something that we so often forget. We so often, like I mentioned earlier, we so often get caught up in thinking about how important we are and how important it is that we do this and we do that we forget that there's someone who should be directing our steps. And we forget that he has given us a plain path of how we are to go about these things. Did you know that God has given us a very plain and clear framework of how we are to reach the people of the cities? You see, this is not taking God by surprise, the fact that so many people are in the cities now. He knew this was going to happen. And so he has given us specific instructions of how best to go about reaching the people in the cities. And I want to read you just a little bit. The Lord has a lot to say about this, and we don't have time to spend a lot of time on this, but I want to just give you a snippet here of what God's plan for city evangelism is. Take a look at this. The cities are to be worked from outposts. Said the messenger of God, shall not the cities be warned? Yes, not by God's people living in them, but by their visiting them to warn them of what is coming upon the earth. Friends, God has given us a very clear delineation of how to reach the cities. And you know what? It never includes living in the cities. We could go into all kinds of things. For example, the example of Lot. We could go into that as a prime example of this. Lot went to Sodom. Lot's plan of evangelism is the one that is followed by so many people today. And, it's important that we come up with ideas of how best to reach the cities. This is essential. But friends, God has given us a framework. And we need to be careful that we don't follow Lot's plan of evangelism. You know what that was? He moved into Sodom. Lot was not a bad man. He's called just Lot in the Bible. He was a city evangelist. He was there trying to reach the people of Sodom. And what did he accomplish? In fact, you know what? We are told that all that Lot did for the people of Sodom could have been done even if he had lived in a place some distance from there. That's powerful, isn't it? That tells us that there is no reason for us to live in the city. God has told us not to live there. And even when it comes to reaching the people of the cities, he says, don't live there. He says, live outside the cities and visit the cities now and then with your God-given message. Study the life of Enoch. This is a whole topic. We could spend a lot of time on this, and we don't have time to. But I encourage you to study the life of Enoch. Study what the Lord has instructed us to do regarding city evangelism, and your eyes will be open, friends. It's time that we stop listening to what humans have to say about this, and we need to start listening to what God has to say about this. This is the plan that God has given us. So, getting into some more particulars. I'm a practical kind of guy, and I want to know, so this sounds like a good theory, but how do you actually implement this? How does this work together? Well, I want to share with you Christ's method of reaching people, Christ's method of evangelism, and it has totally revolutionized the way that I look at evangelism, because we so often get stuck in the rut of thinking that evangelism has to mean doing an evangelistic series for so many weeks, and you have people come to your church, and you do this and this and this. And friends, we forget that Jesus most often used an entirely different method of evangelism. Take a look at this. Christ's method alone will give true success in reaching the people. So what does that word alone mean? It's the only way, right? Only way that works. Okay, so here is the only way that works. The Savior mingled with men as one who desired their good. He showed his sympathy for them. He ministered to their needs and won their confidence. And only then, friends, then he bade them follow me. Wow, that's powerful, isn't it? And one example that comes to my mind is we're told that the Savior healed more than he preached, right? That's a very practical example of how he ministered to the needs of the people around him, right? He healed them more than he preached. So I'm thinking about this, and I'm wondering, well, I wonder what will be the most effective way for us to reach the people in the cities now. I wonder, how do we actually implement this from outpost centers? How are we to reach the people in the cities? And I'm wondering, I wonder if it could possibly be the same way that Jesus did. You think, would that make sense? I think so. He's our example. So, if he healed more than he preached, take a look at this. Henceforth, medical missionary work is to be carried forward with an earnestness with which it has never yet been carried. This work, now notice this work is the door through which the truth is to find entrance to the large cities. So there we go, friends. There we go. And by the way, you may be thinking, well, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a nurse, so I can't be a medical missionary. Is that right? Nah, wrong. How many of us are supposed to be medical missionaries? Every single one of us. And you know what, friends? The beautiful thing of it is, this is not rocket science. These are simple remedies, simple things that anyone can do. Yes, you need to study some physiology. It will help you greatly. Learn about some of these things. There's excellent resource materials out there, excellent books, more and more DVDs being produced on these things. But these are exactly what the name implies. They're simple treatments, simple remedies that any one of us can do to help those around us. And so this is yet another aspect of preparation, friends, that we need to be carrying out. As religious aggression subverts the liberties of our nation, those who would stand for freedom of conscience will be placed in unfavorable positions. For their own sake, they should, while they have opportunity, become intelligent in regard to disease, its causes, prevention, and cure. Notice, it doesn't say that we should become intelligent in regard to symptoms and how to pop a pill, does it? It says become intelligent in regard to disease, its causes, prevention, and cure. And those who do this will find a field of labor anywhere. There will be suffering ones, plenty of them, who will need help not only among those of our own faith, but largely among those who know not the truth. And friends, this is such an important thing. If you don't catch anything else from this, please catch this. During this whole end-time scenario that has been painted out from us, I believe that the most critical point in this whole time, in this whole event line, is this very area right here. Because this is where everyone is making their final decision. They are being sealed. This is where probation is closing for each person on earth. And friends, this is also where all of these other tumultuous things are taking place. The mark of the beast issue is coming about, the decree that no man can buy or sell, all these terrible disasters getting worse and worse, ebbing and flowing, and all of these kinds of things are taking place. And so all of this is culminating right at the point in time where everyone on earth is making their final decision. And so just think for a moment, friends, when infrastructure is greatly hindered or damaged or wiped out, where people who are so dependent upon the systems are not able to get food from the grocery store, they're not able to get medical care from the hospitals and things like this, they're going to be in great need, are they not? And friends, if you and I have implemented the things that God has told us to, we will be in a position to not only take care of our own families, but we will be in a position to minister to others in those tumultuous days. And you know what? This is an incredible opportunity that God is giving us right at the point where they're making their final decision, right at this point on the event line. Right at that point, God is giving us an opportunity to reach people through the practical things of life, just like Jesus did. And so, friends, this whole thing sounds good, but we have one bit of a problem. This is also the time when it becomes very difficult and finally impossible to buy or sell. And so my question to you is, ask yourself right now, we've got some basic necessities of life. If you want to do medical missionary work, it's going to take some basic necessities. Now, this is by no means an exhaustive list, but I just want you to think about the basic essentials that you're going to have if you want to be a medical missionary. And think about each of these things. We've got shelter or heat. You need to be able to keep your home warm if you're going to be caring for people. And water, you've got to be able to have water to drink, to do hydrotherapy treatments, for hygiene and things like this. Most of your hydrotherapy treatments require a contrast of hot and cold. And, of course, nutritious food. These are all important things. And there's more, but this is just a few items I wanted to mention. And so I want you to think about this. These are things that you're going to have if you want to be a medical missionary in the days ahead. And I want you to ask yourself, with the way that I'm set up right now, would I be able to keep my home warm, to have plenty of clean running water, to have hot water, to have nutritious food if I was unable to buy or sell? Would I be able to do that with the way I'm set up right now? And if the answer is no, then friends, we need to do something about it. This is why we're here this weekend. We are here about solutions, friends. God has solutions. He hasn't left us high and dry. There's good solutions for all of these things. And that's what we're going to be getting into tomorrow, friends, is nuts and bolts kind of solutions of how every single one of us can implement this kind of a lifestyle where we will be in a position to be a Noah in these last days. You know, the Lord has given us a responsibility, and it's quite similar to that which he placed in Noah. You know, Jesus told us, as the days of Noah were, so shall also the coming of the Son of Man be. And I just want to finish up with this incredible verse from the book of Hebrews. By faith. Now, friends, when we read this verse, realize this is all talking about Noah exercising faith. Because of his faith, what did he do? By faith, Noah, being warned of God of things not seen as yet. Have we been warned of God of things not seen as yet? We have. So what did he do? He moved with fear, prepared an ark to the saving of his house, by the which he condemned the world and became heir of the righteousness which is by faith. So friends, it was because of his faith that he built this ark to the saving of his house. It was because of his faith. He was playing out his faith with his actions. His actions were speaking louder than his words. Every nail that he drove on that ark was a sermon preaching to the people. You know that? Every action is a sermon. And so, friends, my challenge to you today is to put your actions where your mouth is. We've been talking about getting ready. We've been talking about the second coming of Jesus. I mean, our very name implies it. Seventh-day Adventists. This is our profession. Friends, it's time to stop talking and start doing. My challenge to you is to start living so that when other people who know nothing about your faith, when they look at your life, they will see someone who truly believes that the end of all things is coming. When people in Noah's day looked at him, they didn't even have to hear his words. They could see by his actions that he believed a flood was coming. And friends, our actions need to be just as plain and clear today. When people look at our lives, they need to see physically that we are preparing for the second coming of Jesus. Spiritual preparation is the most important, but friends, God will not do for us what he has given us the power to do for ourselves. We have an important part to play, and that is what tomorrow is all about.